Okay, in this video we're going to talk about percent of change. The thing to keep in mind is percent of change, there is a formula for it. This little triangle represents change, so percent of change is equal to new minus original over original. And the final answer that you will ultimately get will be a percent, okay? So just keep that in mind. A question will ask you specifically to find the percent of change. That's how you know you have to deal with this formula right here, okay? There's several different types of percent problems that we come across, but when they say find the percent of change, they're asking you to give them a final percent, and they're asking you to use this formula. Okay, so let's just keep that in mind. We'll go through a couple of problems. Let's say the problem says we went from 400 people to 500 people. So from would be key to signify the original number right here. So this would be our O. Okay, so we went from 400, okay? 2 means what is happening now, right? To 500. So this would be our new number. So from is our original number, from 400 to our new number of 500. Pretty straightforward when you think about it, pretty logical. So now we're just going to go ahead and substitute our numbers in. The percent of change equals the new number, which we said was 500, minus the old number, which we said was 400, over the original or old number, which is 400. Okay, and now this is pretty straightforward. All we get here is 100 over 400. And remember, our goal is to get a percent there. And we know when we have these zeros on the end, we can cross that off. And we have 1/4 as our fraction. Well, if you can, this should be a fraction that you know in the top of your head is 25%. But if you didn't know that, well, 1/4 is equal to something over 100. You can do it this way, where the bottom number fits nicely into 100. You can figure out what the percent is that way, right? So we learned this in prior lessons, that when you're going from a fraction and you want to turn that into a percent, if you can find the number over 100, that top number will be the percent. So 4 times 25 is 100. 1 times 25 is simply 25. So our number here would be 25%. And that would be our final answer. So we went from 400 people to 500 people. It's a 25% increase. Okay? So that's our final answer. That was a pretty straightforward, easy one. Sometimes they're not so perfect, and we'll get to a couple of those right now. Let's say we are going from 360 pounds to 352 pounds. Okay, so again, from 360, well then this is our O, to 352, so this is our N, and we're going to just substitute those numbers in. Percent of change equals the new 352 minus the original of 360 over the original of 360. Now, just logically, if you went from 360 to 352, that's a decrease, right? We went down in weight. So what we're going to have here is a negative answer. Whenever there is a decrease, you end up with a negative percent as an answer. So 352 minus 360, that's a keep change opposite thing. And what we end up, if we did that, we ended up getting a negative 8 over 360. Now the question is, what do I do with that? Well, there's a couple of things I can do. First of all, negative 8, I'm going to rewrite it down here, over 360. I know this bottom number doesn't fit into 100, or I couldn't divide to get 100. But what I'm going to do first, I'm just going to simplify this fraction. to make it a little bit easier for me. I'm going to divide by 8 over 8, and I'm going to get negative 1 over 45. Okay, so now 45 definitely doesn't go into 100 evenly. So what I'm going to have to do here is do that rule that we talked about, the top dog going in the doghouse. We'll do a little division problem, nothing too painful. We're going to put our top dog, negative 1, in the doghouse, and we're going to divide that number by 45. So just a quick little division problem, and when you do that, you're going to have to add that decimal in and put that decimal on the top. And you know, if you have the same signs, you'd get a positive answer. Well, we have different signs here, so we're going to get a negative answer for sure. And I'm going to have to add a 0 there. And in fact, we're going to have to add another 0. So 45 into 100, well, 45 doesn't go into 10, we'll put a 0 up there. And 45 goes into 100 2 times. 2 times 45 is 90, so we're just going to do that subtraction. And I'm just doing, you know, straightforward division. Again, we're going to have to add another 0 and bring it down. And what ends up happening here, you can tell pretty quickly, is we're going to get this repeating 2 because it's just going to keep happening again and again. So what you have here is your final answer is negative 0.22, negative 0.022, which is tens, hundreds, thousands, which is negative, I'm going to rewrite it right over here, negative 22 thousandths, but you know we don't have our final answer yet because we're looking for a percent. So what we're going to have to do is move that 2 spaces over and add our decimal right there, and our final answer is negative 2.2%. And if somebody asked you to round that to the nearest percent, well, it simply would be negative 2% as our final answer. Now, a whole lot of steps, not impossible, not too difficult, as long as you break it down one at a time. Plug in the substitute, you know, plug it into the formula, get your negative answer, try to simplify it, try to figure out how can I make this fraction into a percent. You have 2 options, either the denominator is divisible by 100 or fits into 100. If it doesn't, you know you have to do the top dog in the doghouse thing. Then you get a decimal as your answer, and then from a decimal you get to the percent. So lots of steps. I know they're not always straightforward, but it's once you practice it a few times, it should be okay. Let's do one more. And they're really not too bad. From 325 to 420. Okay, by now you should figure out what's new and what's original. So I'm going to substitute it right in. 420 minus 325 over 325. Okay, and I'm going to actually, and notice it's an increase, so we're going to get a positive answer. And when I do that subtraction, I get 95 over 325. And then if I divide by 5 over 5, I actually get 19 over 65. And again, we don't have something that we can put right into 100 or that's divisible by 100. So I have to do the top dog in the doghouse thing. So I'm going to take my top dog, 19, put it in the doghouse, put the 65 on the outside, and I'm going to do a division problem again. So I put the decimal here, put the decimal there, I add the 0. 65 into 190 goes 2 times. 2 times 65 is 130. Okay, so I subtract. Not too bad so far. We're going to have to add a 0, bring that down. 65 into 600 goes 9 times, which makes sense. 9 times 65 is 585. I'm going to do a subtraction. Then we're going to end up with 15. I'm going to add another 0. 65 into 150 goes 2 times, and 2 times 65 is 130. So then we get a 20. And then we say, you know what, we have enough of a number now to make, give us an answer. We have 0.292 as our decimal, and you know if you want to go from a percent, from a decimal to a percent, you go 1, 2 over to the right, so you have 29.2% as our final answer. And if they said to round it to the nearest percent, well, then it would just be 29%. And again, it's a positive number because it's an increase and it's our final answer. I would replay this a bunch of times. It's straightforward once you practice it. It's not so bad. You end up with a fraction. To go from a fraction to a percent, you have to have that middle step of getting to a decimal first. So it's a fraction to a decimal to a percent. And once you get the hang of that and practice that enough, you'll see that's really not a big issue at all. So practice, 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 you'll be fine.